to our Twitter session, first ever Twitter session. I'd like to introduce Steve Ladurantaye. I met Steve when he was a media writer for the Globe and Mail. He came to visit the Zoomerplex, and we've kept in touch ever since. He was one of the first hires. Were you the second hire at Twitter Canada?
Yeah, the media hire anyway.
Yeah, so, sorry. I'm sure everyone can hear me. He was the second hire.
It's streaming.
Oh, sorry. He was, it's not on. Is it on? He was so he was the second hire at Twitter Canada, and he recently took himself off Facebook. So I think that's an indication of how confident he is in Twitter as the main social media vehicle. So he's here to tell us about it and tell us what's upcoming future trends. And I'll give you the floor, Steve.
Hi there. So you can either be tall or you can use your laptop, but you can't talk into the microphone if you're not tall and have a laptop. So I'm Steve Ladurantaye. I've been at Twitter for about a year now, just a little over a year. And before that, like Leanne said, I was at the Globe and Mail, where I was the media reporter for about 3 years. And before that, covered serial killers for a little while there with the Russell Williams stuff. And before that, I covered real estate. So I was always in the business section. And when the job at Twitter came up, I wasn't really looking to leave media, but I was seeing that more and more of the stuff that I was doing was happening on Twitter. I was gathering a lot of my news there, and I was also driving a lot of my traffic to my own stories. And covering media was a bit of a marginal beat where, like, you know, I don't know how many people in Canada would be interested in that. But the people that were very active on Twitter, and I was able to use those people as sources. I was able to get them to read my story, and that would bring up my numbers, and that mean more people would read my story. And then when my bosses were like, why are we doing this beat? I could say, well, I've got this audience already built in that I'm able to tap into and share my story with, and they're sharing it for me. So I really do, I went there because I believe in Twitter and I believe in what it's turning into. And I think we're still in the really early days of social media, and we don't really understand what a lot of this stuff looks like a year or 2 years from now. But the one thing that's for sure, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or Whisper or the LinkedIn, whatever the hell it is, like the way we're sharing content is changing, right? That's not going to change. No matter what happens 5 years, we're not going to be distributing our content the same way we are now. And I happen to think Twitter is the best one-to-many platform on the entire planet. There's not many other places where, you know, a prime minister can talk with the president of Iran in front of everyone in real time, on a Tuesday afternoon, just randomly about foreign affairs. That stuff's pretty interesting. So what we'll do is I'll give you a bit of a Twitter 101 for people who aren't really using it that much. We'll start right at the beginning, and then I'll build it up a little more in depth. I'll tell you a little bit more about how your accounts are doing, just as sort of a guideline and what you can expect compared to other media outlets, and then we can talk about how to be good at Twitter, because we do know what works and what doesn't, particularly for media companies. So when Leanne said I was the second employee, they hired a bunch of ad employees first. So, like Twitter sells stuff. There's 30 people in Canada now, or 38. 36 of those people are sales. And 2 of us aren't. So I'm one of the only 2 that aren't tied to revenue. So like I get to go places like this, or to work with media companies. I work with publishers. I work with political parties. I work with politicians, because it's news and government is my job, on partnerships. And I never have to talk about money, which is nice, because that opens the door, and we can just say, like, what do you guys want to do? What projects are you working on? And then we talk about it a bunch. And then at the end of it, we think, okay, well, how can Twitter be useful in this? What products do we have that you don't know about? What ideas do we have that have worked elsewhere? How have other people shared their shows? How have they got it out? So, that's kind of where I come from, to tell you how to be good at this stuff. So I'll show you what we know about being good, and you can ask questions at any time. If you need me to slow down because I talk too quickly, I understand completely too. But I always try to remember that. So Twitter in the world, just as sort of an overview. So there's 1 billion tweets every 2 days. All right, so it's an awful lot of content. And 284 million users around the world. Today we're releasing our earnings, and that number will go up, presumably, and hopefully we'll get closer to 300. When we talk about million users, we're talking about monthly active users. Those are people that log in at least once in the last month. So if you log in once in the last month, you're considered a monthly active user. So that's one part of our audience. But the part we're trying to talk about a lot more are the people who come to Twitter and aren't logged in. So you may just do a Google search. Today we announced a deal with Google where all of our tweets will be searchable in real time. So if you type something in Google and you search my name, it's more like you'll find my Twitter stream than you'll find my website. But these people who don't log in, there's 150 million of them hit the Twitter website every single day, our homepage. and they had nowhere to go. There's just a web page. So we're trying to find a way to give them the content they want. And we're very careful not to position ourselves as a content provider, as a publisher per se. We're a platform. So we want to point them to your content. We want them to find you. The other part are the people who find out about Twitter without actually being on it because they read about it in the newspaper. Prime Minister Harper tweets a video, and then the CTV News picks up that video and they put it on television. You know, you've been exposed to Twitter there. Like, we need to find a way to better quantify that audience because it's much, much larger than the 284 million users. There's this whole broader ecosystem of people that are interacting with our content and not necessarily logging in. You see embedded tweets and news stories. That's a great example where if a tweet is embedded in a Globe and Mail article, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are potentially seeing it that we don't even count as people that are interested in Twitter, even though they're seeing that stuff every single day. So we need to do a better job of making it easier to take all those people who touch it in different ways and actually sign up and become regular users, because that just makes the experience a little bit better. So in Canada, we don't say how many active users we have, but it's many, 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 many millions monthly active users, and not all of them are logging in every day. Not all of them are tweeting. And one thing people will say to me a lot is like, I'm on Twitter, but I don't really say anything, so I'm not really on Twitter. But that totally counts as being on Twitter, right? There's nothing wrong with just logging in, using it as a newswire. My wife logs in every night to read the news. She follows a couple of newspapers, a couple of broadcasters, a bunch of reporters. That's how she gets the news now. She doesn't really feel compelled to say anything. She doesn't want to have a conversation or tweet mean things to the Prime Minister, which is one of the favorite things people like to do. Is she just wants to be able to read the news. And there's a lot of people like that in Canada. And one criticism I often get when I'm out with journalists is they're like, Twitter's just journalists talking to journalists. And then you go talk to politicians and like, this is really just politicians talking to politicians. And then, I'm sure there's like some subgroup of like mining executives that complain that Twitter is nothing but mining executives being upset. There's this like all these conversations that are happening in little silos, right? So it starts to trigger out. But generally, when we talk about demographics, and it was interesting coming here because your demographic is different than the typical groups that I'm talking to. 16 to 24 is about 34%. These numbers are about a year old at this point, but they're still relatively stable probably. We just hired a researcher to get a better idea of where we're at. But the bigger chunk is 16 to 24 at about 32%. Then it goes in about 20% chunks between 25 to 35, 35 to 45. And then it kind of dips down a little bit from 45 to 54. And then there's like my dad who signed up and doesn't know how to use it. And then a couple other people between 55 and 64 is about 64, or about 7%, right? So not a ton in there. And I think what's happening now is we're seeing that usage start to skew. And, yep. No, that's just where they pulled the poll on. This was like Nielsen numbers that we used. So, yeah, no, that's where we stopped. We assumed if you're past 64, then I guess you don't count. Yeah, yeah. But that's the demographic we pull. I would assume if you went, up higher, it'd probably just be 7.3 or 7.4 usage, right? But I'd be surprised to see it higher. But one thing I do see happening is this is like the most unscientific stat that was ever invented. But in like the last 4 months, 4 people's mothers have tweeted at me. And you know that because when that happens, that person whose mother it is sends you a message and they're like, hey, that's my mom, okay? And so, I think there was a move early where that demographic kind of moved onto Facebook a little later and then very aggressively, and they've all kind of got it figured out now. And they're moving on to other platforms, and I think Twitter's starting to catch that. So I think this time next year, I think you see that 7 move closer to a 10, a 10 or a 12 or something. There does feel like there's an older skew to where a lot of the new growth is coming from. And this being an election year, one thing we see on Twitter is during elections it's like a crazy good time for new user signups. And we have a big push on for elections. And the demographics we're looking at to bring onto Twitter, aren't the 16 to 24. We're interested in 45 and older in a lot of cases, because these are the people that are really plugged into political conversations. They're more likely to know who the leader of the opposition is, let alone go vote, right? So I think we will see a lot of growth in that area. Hopefully, that's what we're going for. And then in terms of when people are tweeting, it's interesting. So at like 4 in the morning, it's like 3 angry guys drunk, chatting about hockey, abusing each other vaguely. Around 7 o'clock, it starts to pick up, and this is by every time zone will show the same number. Like you may have fewer users out west than out east or whatever, but the bar chart stays the same no matter what time zone you're in. And it picks up around lunchtime. It's sort of like a newspaper website where it picks up around lunchtime as people are kind of eating their lunch and not working, dips down, picks up again around dinner time. But the real sweet spot for Twitter is primetime television viewing hours. Because what people do is they sit on their couch and they tweet. So they're checking their stream. They're using it as a second screen when they're watching hockey, when they're watching the Super Bowl. I think there was something like 27 million tweets during the Super Bowl. And then there's people like me where I'm home, I'm lying in bed with my kid, she's not sleeping, I'm on my side looking at my phone. Just people are looking at Twitter at night. So if you have content that you're trying to share or important stuff that you're trying to get out into the world, often what media companies tend to want to do is push it out during the day when they're sitting at their desk. And the better thing to do is either do both of those things, put it out in the morning and then at night, but to really tailor your content strategy to push out a lot of that stuff at time when people are sitting in front of the television. Right. And if you're producing content, that's a whole other conversation, of course, too, where you want to be having the people that are on your show, if you have access to them, actually, on their own couch, talking to the people who are watching their show. That's a whole other thing, and incredibly effective. Yeah. Whoa, you okay?
Are there any age demographics related to the time of use? Do you have any of that information?
No. So we just hired a researcher from Ipsos a couple of months ago. So we're starting to build all this Canadian-specific data now. So I'm hoping this time, like 6 months from now, we'll have a better understanding.
US, even international?
In terms of time of day? Yeah, it tends to be the same pattern generally.
But not with age demographics?
That's right. Yeah. So like a 16-year-old is just as likely to tweet at night as a 45-year-old, generally speaking. But I just can't quantify it by country or by demographic necessarily. But yeah. But generally speaking, these are like all users at all times, so it may skew one way or the other, but... Any other questions while we're on that one?
I guess I'll take the time to say the reason sorry about jumping, is we are streaming this live in Vancouver. Hi, Vancouver. So if I don't get to you with a microphone, they can't hear the questions.
Okay. So when she leaps at you, be prepared.
Sorry, Steve, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You said that if you want something to go out, you can put it out in the day and then put it out again at night, so you can retweet the same thing twice.
Just rewrite it. You just send a new tweet. Yeah.
It's not being repetitive by doing that?
No. Because the way Twitter works, right, is like it's a constant stream of rolling information, and I'll talk about this in a minute. So if you have 10,000 followers, chances are 20 to 30% of the people who follow you will see any given tweet that you write, right? So you're not necessarily reaching the same people in the morning that you would at night anyway. And if you tailor it a little bit differently, there's not going to be any sort of resentment from seeing the same thing twice generally, or 3 or 4 times for that matter.
Just very quickly, am I frantically making notes, or are any of the highlights from your deck going to be available?
You could have the whole deck.
Okay.
I'll give it to Leanne, and she can provide it to you guys. Yeah.
Do we want to hold questions till the end after this?
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Yeah, hi.
I do all of the a lot of the social media for the television sites. Split that with some of our colleagues in Vancouver and so on. And I found that our Twitter users, especially with our Vision TV feed, go back and look at older tweets and react with them. So I've tried to not repeat things too much, because then if they're looking at a whole page or the whole feed at once, and then they're not seeing the same message over and over again. So I try and rewrite. Do you find that happens often, or is that kind of an exception to the norm?
Yeah, because I think the thing with Twitter is what it's best at is real time, right? So like the typical user experience isn't to go like back and search a feed and find something that they're interested in talking to you about generally. Usually it's like you just say something now, and then it's like this flurry of activity that happens. And then you could actually see the charts where it'll be like you tweet, you see all the activity, and then it goes over the next hour, and then it's kind of gone forever, and you move on. So that's actually a really interesting usage. If you see a lot of that, I'd be interested in following up on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting phenomenon, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so far so good. 3 and 4 world leaders. I'll just skim through this stuff. It's not the most important thing in the world, but 77% of our users are outside the U.S., which is interesting as well. There's still a perception that we're like this American company, but a lot of the growth is happening in places like India, Brazil, Nigeria. I already said Brazil, Argentina. Canada's one of the bigger markets for Twitter in terms of users, and in terms of penetration rates, we're very high. So that's good. But most of the growth is outside the U.S. And also significant, 78% of our users, and this is true in Canada, it's actually 80%, access Twitter on mobile devices. So they're not sitting at a desk typically, they're on their phone. So we're trying to tailor products that are going to make it easier, particularly around video, and I'll talk about video more in a little bit, but video products that can be served up to phones very easily, so you're actually getting people where they are. And then 53%, 18 to 34 globally. Okay, so and news. You guys kind of get this. I won't linger on this, but news is where Twitter is really, really great, especially when you have breaking news. This is just a great example of the. This is the Ottawa shooting. This was the first tweet that went out after that happened. So this is Peter Henderson. He's a reporter by chance. Although a lot of reporters are walking around Ottawa with Twitter in their pockets. But he's walking past the War Memorial, and he just wrote a gunfire at the War Memorial in downtown Ottawa. He had no idea what happened. He had no idea what was going on. He just tweeted. Only got 13 retweets at the time. But of course, it turned into the biggest story of the year in Canada, and that's the way it broke. I first heard about it because Tony Clement tweeted that he was under a desk in the railway room at Parliament. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I saw Michelle Rempel, who's another MP, tweet that, Mom, I'm okay. So that's kind of like Ferguson, any of these things. Do you think these are where a lot of this stuff's happening? So, there's the two components. There's the breaking news, which some organizations are interested in, and then there's the broader, like sharing video content, getting readers to pay attention to you that we'll talk about even more. So getting started, I don't know how sophisticated you all are, so we're going to start really basic and move up the chain as we go. But we basically say Twitter's the shortest distance between you and what interests you the most, right? So, if you're interested in politics, then you can tweet at Prime Minister Harper. If you're interested in television, you could tweet to the stars of the show. Sometimes they'll get back to you, sometimes they won't, but there is this opportunity for dialogue. And there's also community to tap into communities that have people like you that you could be sharing your ideas with and things, which can be very, very empowering and very addictive. So basically, it works like this, right? So Jill wants to join Twitter. You can see there, poor Jill only has one follower, and she's not following anyone yet. She's living life one tweet at a time. She's new to Twitter. So she's going to find a bunch of people to follow. So there we'll follow Conrad Black, and we'll follow Katy Perry. Of course, she'll follow me and the Globe and Mail. So, now she's following 4 accounts, and they're going to be serving up content to her. And then a few people are going to see her, and they're going to say, hey, she sounds like somebody I might want to follow. So this is my friend in the UK. They're going to follow her, and then she's got some followers there. So that's kind of just like the most basic. You tap into who you're interested in. And then once you click on somebody's name, this is what you're going to see when you go to my page, right? So this is my little Twitter page, and I'll walk you through it really quickly. If you're on mobile, it looks like the one on the right. If you're on your desktop, it looks like this. But there's my stuff. You see how many tweets I've done. I've tweeted 52,000 times, which sounds like a lot, but I did work at a newspaper, so I was doing a lot of live tweeting and things like that. You see my followers, you see things I favorited, and I'll tell you what all that means. But the basic anatomy of a tweet, so your username here, you can see Zoomermag. That's how you identify people on Twitter. That's the name you pick when you sign up. And when you click on that person's name, lo and behold, it takes you to their page. Right, so a nice way to follow through. And then once you're on that page, you can learn some things about them. You can find out how many followers they have, what they favorited, if they're on any lists, which I'll talk about. And you can read their little bio. Here we have news, views, travel, wellness, telling you, what it is, where you can link to them.
Steve, I have a question.
Yeah. Wait. I could repeat the question too if that's easier. I just don't want you to get hurt.
Question about usernames.
Yeah.
If your personal name is already taken. Mm-hmm. Do you suggest something gimmicky? Do you suggest like 2 underscores between your name? Like, do you think a person's personal name is more effective than something that is, more either esoteric or stunty?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, usernames are less important than you may think they are because, that's not how people tend to interact. Because as soon as you start typing, it'll autofill and you'll get your people. But I think you want it as close to a version of your name as you can get generally, just because you want to be some identifying factor. Like you don't want to be, I'm trying to think of something funny. I got nothing. But yeah, as close to your name as you can get. And sometimes there's inactive accounts, and if you wait, they'll get erased from the system, and you can swap them out. But generally, as close to your name as you can get. Underscores are fine, and yeah, it can be tricky. Like I wanted Steve, and it was taken. But I ended up with S. Ladurantaye, which is infuriating because there is somebody Ladurantaye, but they haven't tweeted in like 4 years. And I just want to, anyway. Probably.
I noticed some columnists had switched from having their media company name attached to their own and gone just to their own name or a
Yeah.
version of their own name so that it follows them to through their career.
Yeah, there's been a bit, because you could change that at any time. So you could actually change your Twitter name any time of the day. You just go in and do it in your settings. But there's been a bit of an internal debate among media companies about whether or not you should be branding those handles so that every time one of your people is on Twitter, they see like Zoomer in capital letters immediately after their name, for example. And generally speaking, most have fallen away from that just because A, it looks kind of clunky, and B, it's not a marketing place. Like, nobody looks at that as a marketing place. It just hasn't been incredibly effective, and it tends to cost characters. And you want as few short a name as possible. So.
Like CBC, for example, everything is CBC.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, some of them do, and some of them. But you're right. A lot have been changing lately. It's uncertain times.
Hi, just a question about third-party support. So you guys obviously work with third parties like Hootsuite
Yeah.
and other companies. Can you describe your third-party program?
Sure.
For instance, how would it fit with us here at Zoomer? Would it be possible for us to have an application that would use Twitter and have it customized just for our demographic?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with like official ecosystem partners. There's probably 30 of them that are like Twitter certified partners who have full access to our data and can like. There's lots of companies that do Twitter stuff, but most of them don't have access to all the data, right? So they don't get the full fire hose of content. So you could build something yourself if you're looking to build dashboards and those sorts of things, but you would have limited access to the API, right? You'd hit limits, you'd get roadblocked. I could certainly introduce you to specific ones depending on your needs. There's a couple that we've been working with a lot in Canada. One of them is called Weigh-In, and they do really cool like heat maps and dashboards, and they can chart things in real time and get it to TV really quick. And we have some internal tools too that I could send you some information on, like Curator, that allows you to do a lot of that yourself as well. But we have a whole system of them. I think 30. Hootsuite's the only Canadian one, I think. But depending on what your specific needs are, chances are there's somebody we could hook you up with. Okay, cool. See where I was. Hashtags are the little things with the number sign in front of them or the pound sign. People use these are confusing, and like especially for new users. One of the problems with Twitter is you log in for the first time. You're watching the Super Bowl. You've never been on Twitter, and you're like, hey, everybody's using this. I'm going to sign up for Twitter too because this looks awesome. And then you get on there and it's like this all this stuff coming at you. Really hard to figure out what it means. But hashtags at their most simple are just like labels that group content together. Because what happens when you click on this hashtag is it shows you all the other things that are using that hashtag, right? So you're going to find content you would have never found on your own before. And I've got an example of why that matters for you guys in a few minutes. And then links, when you click on a link in Twitter, of course, it takes you to that website, just like anything else. And then photos and things we're now embedding directly in timelines so that you could actually see the stuff in Twitter rather than having to go look at it somewhere else. And in a few minutes, I'll show you the video product we just launched, which is really cool, that allows you to put video directly into people's timelines and have it play there as well, rather than having to click through 5 times to YouTube or to a specific site. You upload it directly to Twitter, and then you get all the analytics and everything served to you just as well. It's kind of the same as a Facebook player, essentially, the way I understand it, or uploading to YouTube. But I'll show you that in a minute. I'm just going to jump ahead to this stuff. Here we go. A lot of I like to put in a lot of slides about me wherever I go. So being good at Twitter. So this is the stuff you may have seen. Verified accounts are the ones with the little blue check marks beside them, and what those mean is that Twitter has sort of vetted that person or organization and said they are who they say they are. So we'll do that with like celebrities. News accounts, so the Globe and Mail would be verified. I think your main Zoomer account is verified. Conrad Black is verified. I'm not verified because I don't matter. This is like the regular Twitter user isn't going to be verified. It's meant to be a signal that this is a real account you can trust, so that when somebody's looking for information, they can find you. The reason I bring that up is because we looked at broadcasters and news organizations that are verified. We studied 100,000 of them to find out what makes them good at Twitter, what works and what doesn't. This is sort of the results of what we found. And so we'll start with a little bit about you. So this is your main account for all intents and purposes. Everything's Zoomer. You can see you have 8,600 tweets in the last, since 2009. You've got 6,800 followers, which puts you well above the Canadian average of 285 last I heard, and 1,400 following. So you're following a lot of people. and you've favorited 15 things. So favorites are when you click the little star underneath a tweet to say that you saw it, or nobody really knows what favorite means. It's kind of like sort of like a high five saying you saw their content sometimes. Or it could be like, this conversation's over, but I saw it. Some people use it as a bookmark as well, just to come back to it later, because it kind of organizes it all for you in your stream. But generally speaking, a favorite is like, hey, I liked what you just did there. So on that account, you can see a couple of things you can learn, and anybody can do that with their Twitter account. I just use this one as an example. So for your own account, you could log into analytics@twitter.com, and you would have access to all this stuff that I'm showing you here, so that you could understand how your account's working. But the top line thing you're looking at is how many impressions has your Twitter stream generated in the last 28 days. And when we talk about impressions, we're actually talking about how many people have seen that tweet for at least a second in their timeline. Right? So it used to be, before about 6 months ago, if I had to come talk to you, if I retweeted you, I would say, hey, 20,000 people might have seen your tweet because I retweeted it. And we'd be like, hey, 20,000 is awesome. And we'd all get excited and think that was great. But what we realize now is that that doesn't mean that many people saw it, because we talked about how the stream is constantly going past. So you don't see everything that goes out, even if somebody retweets it. So when we talk about impressions, it has to be in someone's stream. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's slightly less than a second. So they have to have scrolled past it actively. If they didn't log in, it doesn't count as an impression. So you can see there, the Life After 60 is a dance, don't stand in the corner. It's a link to a website, got 194 impressions. And that means 194 people saw that tweet. And then 8 engagements. And we talk about engagement, that's any secondary action that somebody takes with your tweet. So if they retweet it, that's an engagement. If they favorite it, engagement. If they click on your picture, it's a creepy engagement. If they mail it to somebody, that counts. If they follow you, all those things count as engagements. And what that all does is it generates into something called your engagement rate. And that's what you see over on the right. And for most accounts in Canada, the news accounts tend to have engagement rates between 1% and 3%. Personal accounts, can be between 4% and 5%, but that's generally what you're going to see. Yours is about where I'd expect it, given the amount of tweeting you're doing. And then you can skip through to the next screen, which is really interesting. It tells you what the people who follow you are interested in based on the type of stuff they tweet about themselves, right? So if you look at Zoomer, well, guess what? 48% of them care about elder care, 46% senior living, 44% empty nesters, 26% retirement planning, and 10% alternative care. That's actually the most on-target interest intersection I've ever seen on any account I've ever looked at. I went to the Hamilton Spectator a few weeks ago, and the #1 was comedy and movies. And they're like, what the hell does that mean? And I had no idea. But you can see it's hitting on a couple of brands. And then under top interests as well, you're getting the same sort of interaction. Elder care, empty nesters, health news, business news. So this is the stuff that people that following you are actually seeking out on their own and talking about. You could also see where they live. And interestingly, and it's interesting to me, you probably know your business better than I do, but it's pretty evenly split between the United States and Canada, your follower base, with a good chunk in California and a good chunk in Florida. Which is really interesting. And then in Canada, the split, Ontario and BC, I think that other little super light blue thing is usually Alberta, I'm guessing, and then the UK. And you can see what cities they live in as well. So Toronto is 8% of your follower base. The trick here is we break it down really specifically. So if I'm in Ajax or Pickering, those are considered 2 different places. They're not considered part of Toronto. So the Toronto number is probably higher. New York's probably higher as well. So all of those would be proportionately would stay the same, but that's kind of where those numbers come from. And then we give you a gender breakdown. 52% female, 48% male. My account is 67% male, and whatever the math is, I'm not smart enough to do that in my 33%. So for 52% female. And the way we determine that isn't by asking you. We look at first names, and then we decide whether it's a boy name or a girl name, and then we throw it in a bucket. And if it's an ambiguous name, we just don't count it. So, it's not perfect science. It's just a rough approximation of who's following you. And again, you can see this all for your own accounts as well. And then you can see who your followers also follow, which can be an interesting way to see where the overlap is, or to find out about accounts you don't know about that may have a lot to do with what you do. 29% of the people who follow you follow the New York Times, 27% HuffPo, then Seniors for Living, Mayo Clinic, After 50 Living, Retirement Media, and the Zoomer Mag account as well only gets 16%. And that's actually really interesting to see that Zoomer Mag only gets 16% crossover with your main account, right? Because there's this assumption usually at media companies that if you have two accounts that are kind of related, it's probably the same people following both accounts. And in almost every case, it's not. When I was at the Globe, I sat beside an ace fellow named Simon. We both covered media, except he was the senior media writer, and I was like the junior assistant media writer. And we would often say, like, don't bother tweeting it, I already did. Or you don't need to share that, I already did. And when I got to Twitter and did the little internal tool we have, it turns out we only had like 5% follower overlap. Even though we wrote about the exact same thing and both had like more than 10,000 followers, that none of them were the same. So you can't assume just because you're sharing something on one of your accounts, the people that are going to want it aren't going to see it on another account. So sometimes it's good to, to retweet your own accounts just to make sure you're getting good exposure. Yep. Yeah. Careful.
Can you confirm
drop your
those
phone.
tools are available only to advertisers?
No, to anybody.
To anyone?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No, we opened it up about 6 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you just go to analytics.twitter.com, anybody can get in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, when we talk about what makes success, some publishers and broadcasters will say, like, the only thing they care about is if people are clicking through to their stories and their video, right? Like, if you're not doing that, then don't even bother coming to talk to us. And we could help with that, but others will say, like, we really want people to talk to us. We want to be engaging. We want a lot of conversation happening, and we can do that too. But one of the really kind of good measures of success are the number of retweets you get, because that means people are looking at it, and you're saying, hey, I'm interested in that. I'm going to share it with my network, and you start to build out this network effect, that helps you build followers. It helps you, get in front of more people. But this is like the perfect. This might be the best tweet ever written in Canada. I think that that's actually a serious tweet. Is Rob Ford? This is when they decided the politicians couldn't march in the Easter parade last year, and Don Pete is a reporter at the Toronto Sun, and he said Rob Ford says he'll respect the beach's Easter parade politician ban, but he wished he knew before buying 10,000 eggs, and there he is, like, with his hands out, like, confused and a little startled that he's got all these eggs, and it got 400 retweets. 200 favorites, so very, very popular tweet for a couple of reasons. One, the thing that worked really, really well on Twitter are like granular bits of information. So like the big headline tweets that a lot of people tend to do don't necessarily push a lot of people there. What they're interested in are like the details that aren't immediately obvious about the thing that you're talking about. So if it's a hot topic, the second, like, everybody knew that the parade had banned politicians, and this bit of information was just a better way to tell that story on Twitter, because it was offering something else beyond what everybody already knew, right? Because there's 100 reporters tweeting the same thing about the parade not allowing the politicians. And photos, which I'll talk about in a second, always get you more retweets across the board. So news organizations and broadcasters that include a photo in their tweets get 27% more retweets when they include a photo than when they don't. That's.
Is there any plan in the future to have it not eat up 22 characters?
We've talked about this. There's been all these stories about whether we will or not. I know that when you upload a photo now on iOS and you tag people's names on it, those don't count as characters, right? So, like, one thing we've talked about is this awfulness of when you log in for the first time, there's all this stuff you got to figure out. We got to find a way to make that stuff less scary. And the CEO said, like, the scaffolding of Twitter is very visible, right, with that sort of thing. So how do you pull that scaffolding back? I think is something we've been, constantly working on and just haven't quite got to yet. But I think, yeah, it's a shame that you got to blow the characters, right? Because you've only got 140. And if you want to use 2 photos, then it gets even worse. And next thing you know, you have no space at all. So for impressions on this tweet, 623,000 impressions that generated. So that is a lot of people who saw that. No link to a story, although there was a little bit later. He picked up a bunch of followers, so they would consider that a pretty successful tweet. So the effect of retweets. So this is this was news broadcasters, newspapers, magazines, and current affairs format television. We examined those 100,000 accounts and we said, what gets them more retweets? So the number one thing I've already said, photos will get you 27% more retweets right off the top. You can try it later. Just go take a picture of the most boring thing you can find in your house, tweet it, and say, like, oh, here's my table, and like 4 people will retweet it for some reason. I'll be one of them, but it does work. And every time I do that, people are like, oh, I'll try that. And then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it worked. This stuff is like science. Quotes work really, really well. So instead of just doing a tweet that said, Steve says, this and that, you would say, quote, this and that, said Steve. That'll get you more retweets than if you don't. Digits just means numbers. So instead of saying, the budget went up by a lot of money, you would say the 5.5% increase means X number of dollars. That stuff does a lot better. Videos. So this is about a year old, this data, and we talk about video URLs. And again, I'm going to talk more about video specifically. So that 15% boost is probably going to be up closer to 30 by the time we talk about the native video stuff you can do now, and then hashtags. When you use the proper hashtag for something, you're going to get about a 14% increase in the number of retweets you get. And I'll explain hashtags a little bit better in like 2 seconds. So here's just 2 photo examples. You can see either one of those tweets. If you kind of like squint your eyes and pretend you don't see the photos, they're not that interesting. So we're #1, Vancouver ranked top city in North America for quality of life. You're like, all right, that's great. 157 retweets though, and it's all because of the photo. You can't imagine one person retweeting that without that photo. And same with the poignant photos from the funeral service for 3 slain RCMP officers in Moncton. You'll get some click-through on that, but you're not going to get 153 retweets without that photo showing you what the gallery is going to look like when you get there. And this goes across the board for almost anything. This is the video player I was telling you about. So one thing we've really focused on is making Twitter a better video experience. So what we've done on the mobile side, and this is important because 80% of the people who are going to be looking at your content on Twitter are going to be doing it on a mobile device, is we've allowed you to embed videos directly into Twitter, and then the user with one tap can play it back full screen, or they could have it running in the corner while they do other things on Twitter. So there's not this, they're not as tempted to go and do other things. They're going to watch your stuff to the end, and you could upload up to 10 minutes of content at a time right now through this player. And it looks like this. It's going to start scrolling in a second. So here we are. What am I going to read? And then you stop and you say, hey, this guy's boyfriend was arrested. That's maybe interesting to me. And then it'll open up in your phone like this and just run in the corner. All right, so there it is. Can you see it? Yeah, there it goes. So there's too many TVs. I never know which one to look at. I have to look at my monitor instead. So anyway, it just gives you this way to watch this video while you're doing other things. Really good for music videos, probably. And for news and for any programming at all, really, that you think people, especially when you know your audience, right? And you can give them stuff that you think they want. I think it'll be a really good way to drive that spend. And when you start to match advertising up against it on your end, that's a whole other conversation, but I think it's a pretty interesting one. And here the National Post used something called our embeddable video. This is a beta product right now. If anybody ever wanted to try it, you can just email me and I'll give you access to it. But what it does is it allows you to directly upload Twitter video through a website, and then it just runs within the tweet. So the Globes, or the Post's challenge is they were covering the Golden Globes like everybody else. But a lot of the conversation that happens at the Golden Globes happens on Twitter, and they wanted to tap into that to drive more people to their web coverage so they can get their numbers up. So one thing we thought we would do is we'll make a teaser and we'll do a promotional video that people will see that will drive to their content. And one of the things they did, this is a total tangent, but we decided they would everybody live tweets the Golden Globes. What they were going to do is live sketch it. So they had 2 cartoonists that were drawing pictures the whole time and would share it like 2 minutes after it happened. They'd have a sketch out. And it worked really, really well for them. But they wanted to promote it, so they did this. I think the volume will work. If it blows your ears out, I'm sorry. Let's see. Is it going to go? There we go. That's not bad. They're singing over top of that, but you can't hear it. I don't know why. Anyway. All right, so you can stay within Twitter. You don't have to go anywhere else. And then she is talking. But yeah, there was talking. I don't know where the talking went. It's kind of weird. And I can't decide if it's better with or without the talking. But anyway, you can see the potential there, right? Where you can get bits of content. You can do teasers. Yeah.
Does this include live video streaming?
We do have live video streaming cards accessible. This isn't that necessarily, but it would look the same. Yeah, so does that include live video streaming? And the answer would be no, but it's a very similar process to do live streaming. Yeah, and not a lot of people have done this yet with the live streaming card in Canada, and I'm dying to do it with somebody.
We'll do it.
Okay, cool. So let's figure something out and like make it happen, because I think it would be, there's a huge opportunity there, especially if it's running in the corner. All right, so hashtags, I won't linger on this, but, oh, sorry, yeah.
Two
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
One is you said so the embeddable video is you can upload through a separate site,
Yeah.
third-party site,
It's our site. You just need to go to a different link. Yeah.
and you're able to share that info
Yes.
with us.
Yeah, if you get Leanne to give you my email address is on the end of the slide too, so.
I just friended you on Twitter.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
So just send me a DM.
Okay. The other question is, so with live video streaming, what is that still in beta or you're
No, live video streaming is a thing we could do
okay?
pretty easily, but it's a Twitter card. So I don't know if you guys use Twitter cards at all, but Yeah, so it's a couple lines of code, and then the more time we have to nail it out, the better. But but it's theoretically not that difficult if you have access to your infrastructure and stuff. With it, when you're this size of place, it's a lot easier than going to try to talk CNN into doing it. All right. So hashtags are just a way to group content. Again, this is just a good example to kind of refine it. There's hashtags around almost everything, and there tends to be one that's used more than something else if you're targeting a specific community. So I don't know what that is for the stuff you guys are doing, but it could be by topic. If it's a current affairs type thing, there may be one around a certain thing. But this is a good example. With the CBC, during the last Olympics, they decided to use hashtag CBC Olympics. The entire rest of the planet was using Sochi 2014, right? And CBC is smart. They knew this, but they thought it would be a branding exercise for themselves. They would be able to, put that on screen and drive people to their content, and that's fine. But what happens is during the opening ceremonies, for example, I don't know if you remember, it was it was in Russia, right? So it was the whole thing that was happening, and I tweeted something about when they were doing the dancing. It was like ballroom dancing. And I tweeted a picture from Beauty and the Beast where the teacup's dancing with the candle or whatever the hell it is. And I was like, this is my favorite part of the opening ceremonies. And I hashtagged it Sochi 2014. And I all of a sudden got it. All these people from Russia started tweeting at me. It was like this, my stream just filled up. It was incredible. And most of them were like, asshole, that's not funny. But some of them were helpful. But it was amazing to me just how much it actually worked. This actually made a difference. And if you look at those two charts, what you're seeing is the green line are people who were using the CBC hashtag, and the blue line, people who were using the Sochi 2014 hashtag. So we're talking about multiples of hundreds of thousands of searches a day. And if you live in Denmark and you're looking for curling content, you don't care if it's coming from the CBC or the Zimbabwe Curling Corporation or whatever. You just want to see it, right? So there's an opportunity to get more traffic.
So what would you say is the easiest and the quickest way to find out what is the what's the hashtag for a certain subject matter that is going to do the most
Totally,
for you?
Yeah, so the easiest straight up answer is just to do a Twitter search and see what comes up in the first couple of mentions. And if you type in marijuana, chances are you'll find what people are using and then click through and see if there actually is a bulk of conversation.
Yeah, in a lot of cases it's probably obvious, but there are some that you
Yeah, some are tricky. If Canadian politics, for example, everybody uses CDN POLI. That's not immediately obvious if you don't follow politics all the time. But if you don't use that hashtag and you're tweeting about something political, you're giving up hundreds of thousands of eyeballs a day. Yeah. Oh. You make me nervous every time you jump off there now.
Thanks. So what you're saying is there's no live directory or even
No.
an index of hashtags?
There is not.
Okay.
So there's sites like Topsy and a few others that if you go there and type in a search term, it'll give you related, what it thinks are related. But there's no official repository because they are changing pretty quickly too. And with the election, for example, there's 5 things people are using right now. And then once we get closer to actual election, you'll start to see it kind of lock into something, and then it'll just kind of live on its own. How are we doing for time? Are we okay? Yeah.
Sorry, is there any sort of algorithm with the hashtags? If I'm a Twitter user with no followers, I sign up and I put, say, TO Poly, and I tweet something in there, is it guaranteed to be seen by everyone in that feed? Will it get its place?
It'll get served just like all the rest, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So that's one of the things about Twitter is there's nothing really standing between any user and the rest of the world, right? So there's no algorithm, there's no search edge rankings or anything. So, yeah. And this is just a search. This is just an interesting different hashtags in Canada that are popular. These are political ones, so Canadian politics, Toronto politics, and BC politics. You can see that's about 30,000 tweets a day for the CDN Poly hashtag, and then it kind of jumps around. Those spikes are all Toronto election related. And you can, I don't have to tell you what that means. They're all Rob Ford spikes. So the first one is, I think, the crack tape. Second one is rehab. Third one, stepping out. And then the actual election, nobody cared by then. It was just yeah, behind.
Digital marketers or strategists have this great way of following you. I'm curious how social strategists who have 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 followers, who are simply social strategists, and they have a little tag that there's something else on the bottom that they enjoy yoga.
Right.
How do they spam you when you're doing?
How do they find you?
Yeah, how do they spam and follow you immediately? Obviously, waiting for a follow back and.
So you're talking more not legitimate
No,
social
they all
strategies.
seem very legitimate, but they're all social marketers.
Right.
How they're going to help you, and if you look at their tweets, how they're going to help you engage your social marketing capability.
Yeah, I haven't.
It's a lot of nothingness. And
Right.
somethingness.
I haven't had those people follow me necessarily or seen it with any of our corporate accounts, but
Okay.
I think there are people that just try to make a business out of that sort of work. And if I were doing that kind of work, it would benefit me greatly to follow as many people as possible and hope that 10 of them bite on, right? So, I mean, any account that you think is following you that you're kind of annoyed by, you just block them and they'll never see you again too.
Okay, I'm curious.
Yeah. Specific spam accounts we go through and blast out fairly regularly. So what'll happen sometimes with like big accounts, there'll be like 500,000 followers, and then all of a sudden they'll lose 10, and they're like, "What the hell just happened? Like, is this something we said? Is it our content?" And it's just that we did a sweep on spam accounts because we're trying to keep on top of them and get rid of them as quickly as we can because it doesn't help anybody to have them essentially. You good? You have to lurch at him. One other piece of advice: if you're tweeting at somebody, always include their username. Just because if you don't, then they're not going to see it, right? Because when you use my Twitter name in a tweet, I see it, and I'm like a raging egomaniac, and chances are I'll retweet it, and then you'll get the benefit of that retweet. But we actually do see users that tweet fewer URLs and more mentions at people gain more followers, right? So the more you talk with other people, the faster your rate of follower growth will be, and that's even if it's people you follow. The people who follow those people are going to see you talking to that person, and that's going to lead to more followers as well, right? So it's just kind of taking advantage of the network effect. And the number one way to increase your number of followers, and this is always like, I want more followers, followers are awesome, but the number one way is to live tweet something that's either exclusive or newsy, and a lot of channels that we'll go talk to or a lot of broadcasters be like, we don't really have access to a lot of stuff that, this is just stuff we do, or but you actually have great stuff, right? Like the stuff that you guys do isn't the stuff that people are used to seeing. So behind the scenes stuffs work really well if you're setting up a show. The live commentary during a show, if you have access to the people, if you have access to guests, all that stuff works really well. It doesn't have to be the fire across the street. It can be anything that you do that people are halfway interested in. When I say live tweet, I don't mean like 500 in a row necessarily. It could be just like 2 or 3 things to say like, this is happening right now. We know it's happening. Here's what we think about what's happening. And it just lets people know that you're there. You're sending some signals that you're engaged. And my favorite example in Canada of people live tweeting something that you wouldn't think would be interesting that was actually really interesting was Sunnybrook Hospital last year decided that they wanted to live tweet surgery to try to build awareness for its cardiac unit. And the more followers they have, the more they can market to people, the more they can solicit donations, all these things, right? So more followers is good. So they decided they would live tweet a bypass surgery with a 57-year-old patient who they called Lou. And good for them, he didn't die, which was all I could think the whole time is like, I don't know if that would have got them more followers, fewer followers. So what they did is they gave a BlackBerry to a doctor, and they just said live tweet what's happening, and not the doctor that was doing the surgery. It was a different doctor, but it wasn't me is the point. It wasn't like me standing there saying like, oh my God, they cut this guy wide open. It was actually like informed medical dialogue. That was really interesting. And they did it over a morning, and look what happened to their follower growth. It went from just a little over 14,000 to just under 24,000 in a couple hours. Right, like they moved the needle considerably, and they couldn't have done that any other way easily. It was astoundingly successful, so astoundingly successful that they did it again this year, except it was a colon surgery of some sort, and the interest just wasn't quite as high, but they still saw the same sort of delta of, I wonder why it's here's some bum surgery, enjoy. Human tweeting works better than algorithmic tweeting. So what happens at a lot of places, they're like, we don't have time for this. We got 10 headlines. We're going to pull them off our website exactly the way they are and send them out. So NPR, we talked into turning off their RSS feed as their main source of Twitter news for 5 days. And they did, so they started writing tweets like Happy World Goth Day, and it has a photo, and it's got a link. But what they saw is during the 5 days of manual updating, they actually got about 150,000 visits to their website from their Twitter handle, which is almost 50% more than they usually get. right? Because they were actually curating it and thinking like readers or viewers, and then they tweeted that the links were clicked on 100,000 more times than the week prior. So they were actually seeing a direct follow through on the number of clicks they were getting because they were taking the time to compose each tweet rather than using the same headline tweet for Google, for Facebook, for their website. And then they gained 5,000 over the same week. So you just see, again, just like, humans are better at things than RSS feeds. And that's some good proof. So, that's kind of the big overview. We just released a product like 2 days ago. It's probably on your phones now, which is live video, which means you could point your phone at something now when you go outside for 30 seconds and upload that video directly to Twitter without having to do anything else. So just like you would take a photo with your phone, you can do that with video now too. And it's so new that I can't even make a slide about it, but it is cool. So if you're able to play with it, I'd recommend it. I think it'll be a big deal. There's my email address on the bottom. You can email me anytime. I'm easy to get a hold of, and I'm easy to find on Twitter. And I've still got time for questions. If you have any, I'm happy to answer them.
I still don't understand how Twitter makes money. Can you explain how they make money?
Sure. So, we'll find out at 4 o'clock when we release our earnings whether we make any money or not, I guess. But the idea is strictly through advertising, right? So we sell promoted trends. So every day, the top trend on the list of those things on the side is sold around the world, by country. So that's one ad product. The other one is promoted tweets. So as a marketer, and again, I'm the only one at Twitter who's not tied to revenue, so half of what I say about the ad products is probably a lie. But they're not. Like, promoted tweets are the main line of business where we have a database essentially of people that we know a lot about. And if you're a marketer, you want to reach these people with your content, you could say, like, I only want this tweet to go in front of women between 35 and 40 who live in these postal codes and have tweeted about cars in the last 6 months. Those are the only people I care about. And your tweet, whatever it is, will just be served to those people, and they'll see it, and we can guarantee they see it because we track it. And there's a proposition there as well on the advertising side.
Does it stop at 65?
No, I think the targeting is wide, yeah. Yeah, and it goes by postal code and language as well. So that's sort of the broader ad play is that. And then there's other deals with data, and like we sell data to other companies as well. So that's another line of business.
Even if they don't follow you?
Yeah, exactly. So the benefit of a promoted tweet is that if I tweet, I can only reach my followers generally, right? Like, easily. With the promoted tweet, it doesn't matter who your followers are. You're saying who you want to go out and target, right? So you could target the followers of someone else. You could say, I want this tweet to go to everybody who follows Prime Minister Harper. So if you follow Prime Minister Harper, I want this promoted tweet in front of those people. And it could be an advertisement, it could be a link through to a product, it could be it could be any number of things, but you're able to target, in that case, by followers, but you could also target by interest, you can target by demographics, you could target by, like I said, postal code. So that's basically the money proposition and stock offerings. Yeah, I hope it's doing well. We've released a whole bunch of new stuff this week.
I'm not a tweeter, but I will be. So forgive me if my question is very basic. Is there any way to control negative tweets? I work on the Zoomer shows.
Right. I assume you don't mean your own, right?
Right. So,
prone to outbursts.
just for example, if we had attendees and exhibitors tweeting about their experience at the show, if somebody's not having a great time and they tweet and they tag or hashtag or whatever
Right.
the show, is there any way we can control that?
No.
Super.
Yeah, no, but what I would say in that case, it's funny. I was in Vancouver last week, and I was at the Fairmont, and I just happened to run into their social media person, and we had a drink, and she said what's worked really well for them that they hadn't really thought of is Twitter has served as like an early warning system for them, because what happens is I go to my room and I'm like, this is awful, I hate it here, and I tweet it, and they see it immediately, and they can get to me before I go to Expedia and write a big nasty review, and before I go to Yelp, and before I go to my friends, because I've already signaled it on Twitter, right? So there's actually an opportunity there to take this bad experience that somebody's having and say like, hey, like, can we make it better, right? So there is that. The other side of that is, I tweet something and immediately somebody's like, you're a dirty jerk and I hate you and I'm gonna slaughter your family, right? Like, this is like the awful people that they're gonna be out there. And generally speaking, we will delete accounts that harass or abuse. And I'm your conduit for that as an organization. Like, if something was happening with one of your hosts or somebody on a show, you would come to me and like file the report, and we'd be able to shut it down fairly quickly. Yeah, but generally speaking, it's an open platform, and that's kind of the benefit, is that it's not censored and it's not controlled.
Sorry, I missed earlier when you were showing the distinction with putting the user's @ symbol
Right.
name in a tweet. I just want to clarify. So if I send a tweet and I've got 100 followers, I don't need to put anyone's name. It's going to show up in all 100
That's right.
things. So why would I put any one particular person's name unless I'm privately tweeting them?
Because it'll show up in their feed.
But wouldn't it show up automatically? Oh, this is for people who aren't already following.
Exactly.
I'm an
so all the
idiot.
people,
Never mind.
yeah. So all the people that don't follow you will see it if they follow that person, right? And that's why, like, I go down a real rabbit hole now. If you start a tweet with the @ symbol, the only people that can see it are the person who's tweeting it and the person, the other person and the followers you have in common, right? So I wouldn't see it if you two tweeted each other starting with @ symbols. I wouldn't see it unless I followed both of you. So you can actually cut people out of the conversation that way. But generally speaking, it shows up in everybody's feed when you do it. That's Yeah.
Can you explain that again?
Yeah, it's the most. When we talk about making Twitter simpler, this is like the best example because this is all built on like old SMS messaging systems, right? So if you start a tweet with the @ symbol, the only people that can see it are the person who sends it, the person who receives it, and the people who follow them in common, right? So what'll happen is like, Peter Mansbridge will send a tweet thinking he's talking to the world, but he'll start it with somebody's name, and that means like 10 people saw it because those are the people who saw them in common. So it's like an arcane, weird quirk.
Here's a message for.
Yeah, then everybody sees it. Exactly. So you'll often see tweets that start with a period and then the @ symbol. That's why people do that, is just to give any character before the @ symbol breaks that up. Right. Yeah.
Or your message, and then
Right.
this was amazing at.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Then you get around it all together and it works the way you would think it would work.
appears in your feed and their feed.
Right.
And anyone who follows either of you.
Right.
Or if anybody stumbled across it, though.
Right.
I think that's where
Right,
they're
public
confused.
profiles that
Right.
are not, okay.
Yeah.
Question, you glossed over
Everything.
something. So I'm just, yeah. Well,
It's only so much
selling
time. I
data to
talk all
other
day.
companies.
Yeah.
That's just,
Sorry, what was it?
selling data to other companies.
Yeah.
It was a way that Twitter makes money.
Sure.
So just like, of course, there was like such massive kind of outrage. Oh my God, Facebook, you own our pictures now
Right.
once we start posting them.
Yeah.
So just with now, the encouragement of posting photos, videos, and now kind of like a Vine-esque 30-second
Yep.
live video. Can you talk to us a little bit about like who you're selling it to and what you're selling, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. It's not so much like selling to Colgate information about people who have brushed their teeth. It's more like third-party company like DataMiner, an example, where they take all of the Twitter data and they built a product with it, right? And they're pulling our stuff into their product.
So you wouldn't necessarily. So you're kind of repurposing the data
Right.
as a sellable.
That's right.
Sellable thing.
I'm going to build a business off the back of Twitter.
Our photos.
Right. And no, we don't own your photos.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think you answered my question, but I just want to get some clarity. So, if someone is following us, any of our brands, they can write anything nasty as they want on Twitter. We can't do anything about that.
Right.
But yesterday, your CEO, Dick Costello, accepted blame for the
Right.
trolling issue
I read that,
you
yeah.
guys have.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference? Is that more like personal attacks
No.
on individuals?
No, the difference is, I can't confirm or deny the existence of a memo that I haven't seen or may not exist since it's not official. But the problem we've had is, what people will say is we're very slow to act on reports of abuse. So when something is happening, when something bad is happening, and the average person says like, this bad thing's happening to me, Twitter, fix it, it takes forever if anything happens at all. Right, and that's a problem. So they may hit the abuse criteria, like, this person may be violating policy, but there's 300 million Twitter users at a 3,000 person company, and most of us don't watch abuse. And we don't have a good way to flag that stuff and shut down accounts quickly enough. And I think
The change is happening.
That's right.
Will speed up the process.
Exactly, yeah. And we've gone a long way. We've worked with a couple of groups in the States in the last year, particularly one women's group, to make it so that they could report to a special account that would escalate it more quickly. It's that sort of stuff that we got to figure out, because there is no reason that somebody should be able to threaten to murder you on Twitter, right? Like it makes no sense. Yeah.
I know it's.
I get that a lot. Yeah.
I know it's relatively new, and you said that the live streaming had a limit of 30 seconds, but
Yeah.
for either embedded video or for the in-stream video, do you have any information about like, you're saying like, for instance, like embedding photos, that increases retweeting. Any information like that specific to video or like kinds of video content, in particular lengths?
So how long can you upload videos for?
Well, in general, technically, what's the maximum length of time for a video that you can embed or put in stream, and then what kind of like responses do you see to different kinds?
Right. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So on the video side, on the video upload, if I'm not mistaken, it's 30 minutes is the maximum. It could be 10 minutes. I'll have to double check, but I think it's 30. And then on the data, I just don't have any data yet about what's working and what isn't. It's just kind of anecdotal at this point because it's literally like weeks old, right? So we need to, like with the point and shoot video, like there's only been one person in Canada up until 2 days ago had done it. It was the Prime Minister. And did okay for him. Like mine didn't do so good when I did it the next day. So I think we need some more time to figure out what's going to work. I meant to say so well, not good, by the way.
So,
did you get Stephen Harper to do that? Was that you? Did you put it on his phone?
Yeah, I phoned him up. I'm like, hey, bro,
Did you?
do me a favor. No, but we do work with politicians, and when something like that comes out, we'll be like, if we have 5 access points, we'll try to figure out who might want to use it. And if they want to, we look to the biggest accounts first. Yeah.
Is that income source?
No, everything I do is tied directly to usage. Yeah.
so would you advise against cross-platform sharing? So, for instance, on Instagram, you have the option of sharing cross-platform.
Sure.
Is that advised? Because I was always told that it wasn't.
Yeah, you can cross post from Twitter to Facebook too in your settings. The problem with Instagram, and Instagram's fine, but Instagram blocks us. So they're the blocker on this. So you post a photo on Instagram, you share it through Twitter on Instagram, and then you see it on Twitter. You see the text and you see a link, right? So you get 0 of the benefits from posting the photo that you would get if you had posted a photo otherwise, right? Because the photo won't show up in the stream, it just show you a link. So that 27% boost to retweets that you would expect to get from a photo, you won't get. That's the downside. So, but the counter argument is kind of a pain in the ass to go upload a photo again the second time, so I'm not going to do it. I get it. But if you're looking for like the bigger reach, then it's better to just go into your camera roll and write a separate tweet with the same information. It's worth the extra 30 seconds, yeah. Any more? Nope.
Check your Twitter.
Oh yeah, they were going to ask questions on Twitter. Sorry.
So are you
nobody
come
threatened to
back in
murder me?
6 months and see if the 55 plus demographic has increased since you came to see us?
Yeah, no, I think, I'd like to have actual data that proves this. It's the nice thing about, I'm not like, so what's up on Twitter? You guys are boring. We were expecting maybe that somebody would send a question from Vancouver, so we're going to just make sure there aren't any. There's somebody threatening to kill me. No threats yet?
I don't mind actually asking one more question.
No, keep asking.
Where is, I just pulled up the Twitter app, and there's photo taking or video taking.
Okay.
And so where would I choose to live video upload?
So if you wanted to do like a 30-second video
Yeah.
upload? So it'd be like taking a photo.
Okay.
So you would hit the button to take your photo or whatever. And then
To
there's
take
probably
okay.
And there's probably going to be a little video camera type icon there.
Okay. There wasn't. And maybe
This is like an anxiety dream happening right now.
Android?
Like, if it's not on there yet, it's because you probably need to update the app.
Okay. I'm going to update and I'll get back to you
Yeah.
momentarily. Is
Yeah.
it supported for Android?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm on Android too.
Okay.
It's just a staged rollout. So if you don't have it like this second, you may have it an hour from now. You may have it
Oh, I
tomorrow.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
To be continued.
But it's basically the same as sharing a photo. Sorry, let's see if.
Now I see it. Everybody's updating their phones.
That's all right.
Come on, Vancouver. Anybody got any questions? Tweet them.
Seriously, this is they're probably in there. I just can't find them because there's a lot of stuff on there right now. Well, Vancouver can phone me anytime. How's that? I'll go see them. I go to Vancouver a lot, so I'll go see them. Somebody's complaining that he's not verified. See, this is most of my life is people saying, "Can you verify my account?" Which I don't technically do. But anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it is cool. I think the video thing, like the direct video upload, to point and shoot your phone and take a video is going to be a really big deal. Because like a lot of people consume video, but not a lot of people create a YouTube account and go and upload a video. Like it's just not really the experience.
For some of the scenarios that you were talking about, specifically like politically speaking, or like, hey, I'm under my desk, mom, I'm okay, whatever,
Right.
and then just getting some footage
Seriously,
of
yeah.
what's happening, that would bring it to a whole nother
Yeah,
level.
and something else that's really, really cool. I don't think you guys are using it. You guys using Snappy TV at all? So if you're a company that has access to raw video, what Snappy does, and obviously you do live video streams, Snappy allows you to edit and share content off of a live stream, live or recorded, in about 5 seconds. So Maclean's, if you go to Maclean's magazine and just scroll through their feed at some point, they're watching Question Period, and every time somebody says something interesting, they clip it and they share it on Twitter, and you get a video embedded in Twitter, and it takes them about 30 seconds to do, which I think personally we're saving parliamentary democracy with this. But some people just think it's a neat way to share content. But if you do have live feeds, you don't even have, like, you literally, it's a cloud service, it's free, and it just plugs into your system and grabs it and you share it in seconds. And time to market is really important with that kind of video. So being the first mover on it can be really great. Anyway, that was a complete sidetrack, but Snappy TV is really cool. And if you're interested in learning about it, send me a note and I'll hook you up with them. All right? Okay, good.
Do you work with TED directly? The conference? The reason I'm asking is Connie, the producer of Idea City, which is a sort of out of our normal media group.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest? Do you have ideas, I guess, for more live events that take place in a short period of time? Do you work with them directly?
Yeah, that's typically, that would be like a project type thing where we'd say like, hey, we've got this thing we're going to do. It's going to be 2 days. We want to incorporate Twitter somehow. And then I would run around to all my little friends around the world at Twitter and say, what have you guys done? Come back with some ideas, and then we'd figure out what we could do, what we couldn't do. Okay. Yeah.
So we can follow
Yeah, you could totally follow up on it, yeah. Yeah, that's the answer, yeah. Yeah.
You could actually test your live streaming with Idea City.
Can I what?
Your live streaming that you'd like to do.
Yeah, that's a great example, right?
Idea City would be a perfect example for you.
Yeah, for sure. And also Snappy TV, because that live video feed, you could actually be just clipping the best stuff and sending it out as well, so that people that don't want to sit and watch 30 minutes will probably watch 10 seconds, all right?
Idea City is very much like, it's parallel to TED.
Right.
They both come from the same father, Richard Werman. And so if you can imagine the TED conference, Idea City is Canadian equivalent of it.
Yeah, I've been.
Do you have any thoughts on what the best way to incorporate Twitter specifically into television programming, beyond just saying like, hey, tweet at our show with this hashtag that nobody really cares about?
Right.
What's like, or having like the character of Twitter appear in your drama or whatever?
Right. So what kind of show? It really does depend on the kind of show. And
like, say, like a documentary lifestyle type show.
It sounds like you have something very specific in mind.
One that I may be tangentially involved with.
Yeah. No, I think different shows, different things work. So it's really a case of saying like, if you want to send me an email and we could talk about something specific, then I can find some examples of things that have worked elsewhere. And, like I'm working with a documentary maker at Univision right now around a specific project, and they're trying to actually do the documentary work on Twitter ahead of time, and then figure out how that, when the thing shows, how do you tie it all? Like there's you can get into really crazy, interesting things, or there's probably just some really basic stuff we can do too. So. Yeah, just send me an email.
I will, thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions from Vancouver.
Oh, perfect.
Can we upload video files on the desktop to Twitter via Twitter website?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
But not unless you tell me which account it is and when you want to do it. So you follow up with me. I can make that happen. It's just that you can't do it right now. You need to be whitelisted.
Okay. And what is the optimal length of video to gain more impressions?
I don't know yet. It's too new. But I think generally speaking, what we're seeing is, the 30 seconds to a minute tends to be where it starts to drop off, right? Like all web video, I think, like in terms of completions.
I have a question, actually.
All right.
So I work out on the floor during any productions that we do. And for instance, we had a mayoral debate here. Mm-hmm. And I was literally like right in front of everybody, right in the middle of the table. So I tend to send out a bunch of tweets with the photos, like this is happening live on the floor. I do have, I think like 200 some odd followers. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, it doesn't seem to get retweeted enough to, you know what I mean?
Right, to build that traction?
Yeah, but I've sent out, God knows, maybe 5,000 tweets. Like I've been active for a long time. Right. So I do hashtag, I do send the photos, I do reply at people. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, is there a better way?
Yeah, I think in that case specifically, I would say like tweeting it from your account would be less effective than like getting access to the big account and doing it from there.
Yeah.
Just because you do have the bigger base, and more people would look to that, looking for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And especially if you throw to it on air as well, say like, for behind the scenes.
Yeah.
photos, just follow this Twitter account. And then you're also pointing people to your main account and building followers there.
Yeah, because I
Debates are a great
I
example.
send it out to like our social network people here just to
Right, to
here's the
amplify.
photo live, whatever, if you want to send it to. And it's like they're the only ones that tend to kind of. It's like they almost see, they're the only ones that see it. And I had one of the CT or CP24 ladies retweet it too, and it's
Right.
like nothing what I was actually expecting.
Right. So you expected like a wider take up based on the stuff you
More
had?
than like 5 or 6 retweets.
Right, yeah, that's fair. Were they good? Yeah, I mean, there's a million variables. But yeah, we could, if we had talked about that beforehand, we could probably figure out a way to get that stuff in front of more people.
Okay.
Yeah. Debates are a great example. I don't know if you guys will do anything in the election, like the federal side, but I think there'll be some really interesting stuff we can do there.
So also inside the Zoomerplex is the not-for-profit advocacy association called CARP.
Yeah.
So big on our agenda, and the Canadian Poly, Canadian Provincial Poly as well. So did you look at any of our info when you were looking at
No, I didn't pull any specific data on that. Yeah.
So more to what Daria was saying there, for any of large events like that, so on, you would suggest that we just take advantage of our largest following groups or largest following group, and filter everything through that.
Yeah, many times. I mean, every event's so different, right? But generally speaking, you want to, you want to be pushing people to one main account anyway, just because it's really hard to build up a bunch of periphery accounts and get it the same amount of.
What about creating specific hashtags? Because I mean, we had a show. It's called Clean Living, and we used that as a hashtag. We were able to find a few people that posted up photos, but it was mainly about living clean, and it was just fruits and vegetables and grass and stuff like that. So what? I'm just
It's a sneaky name.
The actual host ended up tweeting the same hashtag, but she also used Clean Living with Toscarino, for instance.
And she see more.
Yeah, which was very specific, but super long.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest what kind of hashtags do you
I would look, maybe you want to broaden out there a bit and think like what the people that are interested in that sort of stuff, what do they tweet about a lot, and then use one of those hashtags. Like maybe it's like hashtag yoga, like who knows, right? Like, or hashtag vegan or whatever it's going to be, like something that's used more widely by more people. Instead of trying. Hashtags work really well when you have a critical mass of people, like at a conference, for example, like when you have a room full of 500 people and they're going to be on their phones and you can jam it down their throat and say, everybody in this room will use this hashtag, and they're all talking to each other. People outside know that this is happening in this space. You can impose it on them in a different way than you can kind of with television or like with a broader, article or something. Okay. Yeah. All good? So that's my email address on the bottom. Do feel free to use it. I'm happy to answer questions. And thank you. Sure.